Well, let's get started here. I appreciate you guys showing up. It's I know the weather's kind of turned buffalo-y type. I'm not from Buffalo. I'm from New Hampshire, so we don't get this a lot. We get it occasionally, but apparently you guys get both this plus wind that'll knock you over and fun stuff. So anyway, I do appreciate you guys showing up. I want to talk about how do you rig your boat for this lake out here, for Lake Erie. I fish mainly Champlain and Lake Ontario in the St. Lawrence River, and I fished Erie quite a few times. And each lake has a different wave pattern, but the rigging is pretty much the same across to make sure that when you go out on your boat that morning and you come back in the afternoon, your boat's the same as when you send it out, okay? You don't want to come back in with parts hanging off. I've been in a lot of bass tournaments where guys from the south think they know how to drive the boats. They have two speeds in their boats. Full speed, which is 70 something, and 0, where they're sitting there fishing. Okay? And people who fish up here realize there's a variable amount of speed. You can't, I mean, I was a camera boat one time on Lake Champlain, and I've got a 22-foot Ranger, the deep haul one. And I'm running back to the weigh-in area at doing roughly 22 miles an hour. I'm catching up to another a deep V type skeeter, but my bow is just barely touching the next wave because the frequency of the waves are pretty short. Well, that was a tournament that Seth Fiedler ran back because he was late for weigh-in or getting to be. He ran back. His units ended up floating onto an island. Okay, so this is what you don't want to run into. So, okay, so let's see. Is this going to? Oh, it helps if you. There we go. Now we're going. All right. Okay. So let's talk about kind of the process. I'm an engineer, so I'm anal. Okay. You can ask anybody that deals with me. And I don't mind being called that in several terms. So, anyway. But the first thing I like to do is I like to look at my installation, and I like to plan what I'm going to do. That way I know what parts I'm going to need, or at least have an idea. I want to look at where I'm putting things in the boat, and I want to make sure that when they're put in the boat, they're going to be rugged and they're going to last. Okay, I don't want to rig a boat twice. Okay, I want when I rig a boat for somebody or for myself, once it goes out, I don't want to have it come back in. Oh, I got to fix this. I got to fix that. You don't want to do the same. You don't want to spend time working on your boat unless you like that. You know, spend time cleaning it rather than repairing it. Okay. So, and I want you to spend time using your electronics. Okay. So we're going to talk about the rigging portion, and what rigging is. I'm talking about electronics rigging. I don't rig motors. It's big stuff. I don't deal with motors. I do trolling motors, but electronics. And if you get your electronics rigged right, dialed in, you can go out and have a lot of fun with them, and you'll be back on or off the water, and they're going to last you. Okay. Talk a little bit about testing, not a lot, because that's involved. And same thing with sonar setup. I got a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel on how to set up units for the boats. And specifically, the majority of those setup videos are on Lowrance units. I got some on Garmin. I don't think I have any videos on the Hummingbirds. So, and I'll show you a little bit of my boat from a couple years ago. So anyway, so installation planning. Okay, first off, how many units do you have, and where are they going to go on your boat? Okay, if I'm rigging a bass boat, if the guy says, I want 4 units, we're going to put 2 on the bow, and we're going to put 2 in the console, okay? If I got somebody that has a Lund boat, I got 2 units. And I say, okay, are you going to fish from the bow? If they're not fishing from the bow, we're going to put the units in the console area, okay? But if they fish from the bow, in fact, I converted a Lund a couple years ago, right near Cabela's here, and he originally had no trolling motor on the boat, and he basically used it for trolling. He wanted to get into fishing for bass from the bow. So what we did is we moved one of his unit that he had on the console up to the bow, and then put a new unit on the console, replaced transducers, and put a trolling motor up there. So we basically said, okay, for his situation, he now has units spread across the boat. So again, figure out that first, because that's going to determine how much wire you need, what type of mounting you need, things like that. Okay, so once you get beyond or past how many units you have, now let's think about how many transducers you need. Okay, I was just talking to a guy in the hallway here. He has 3 Airmar type transducers, plus he's got a live system, plus he's got a side scan system, so he's got 5 on his boat. I think I've got 6 on mine. So, but I also do a lot of transducer testing as well. So, but you got to figure out where they go. If you have an aluminum boat, you have to mount them on your transom. Okay. If you have a fiberglass boat, which is what I have, they go either in the hull or on the transom as well. But actually, I have mine on the jack plate. Are you going to have live sonar in your boat? Okay. So as I'm talking, if you start thinking about how much power you're going to need, so now you're going to have to plan for that. Okay. So, and the other thing is, you're going to add any other devices. For example, a compass. Electronic compasses are very handy. You want to put a stereo on there. You want to put a satellite system on. And why would you want to put a satellite on there is that the XM series has a weather subscription you can get. Since you guys are in a lake, you have weather that rolls in. Sometimes it rolls in a little bit fast. You'd like to know what's coming in. Okay. Now you can either see that on the radar or you can see it on the satellite. If you get either one of those, you can set up alerts. So you can actually alert on your unit to give you a verbal warning that, hey, something's coming, check the screen, get out of here. Okay. Me, when I'm fishing, especially like on Ontario about at the ducks, I've always got my eyes on the sky. Because if you don't, you're going to get bit. I keep it out towards the lake, and I also keep it towards the shore. I look at the windmills on the shoreline. And I watch the direction they're turning and how fast they're going. So that one, I was in one tournament out there. I was out on the lake, and I told my co, I said, co as in co, at 11 o'clock we're going in. He says, why? It's calm. I said, it won't be another half an hour. So we got off the lake, ran off the lake at 70, no problem. I get back to the service trailer that afternoon to get something done, and there's a boat that came in with no trolling motor on the front of the boat. His units were ripped off the boat, and his engine was hydrolocked. Okay, yeah, that was a major, yeah, because he stuffed a wave, and when he came down, the engine just flooded and done. Okay, so those are the things you really have to worry about. So, and the other thing you want to try to plan for, are you going to add anything once you put this system in place? For example, your budget may say, I can afford 2 units and this right now, but I'd eventually like to add a couple more, okay? So you got to plan for that. And what I'm talking about by planning, put your wiring in for kind of what you want to eventually have. That way when you add, say, another unit to it, you don't have to do anything. I just did a Triton boat that 2 years ago, I wired his whole boat. So then to put another unit on the bow, we had to change the mount, simple to do. I didn't have to change the wiring at all. I just screwed into the terminal block there. So that's the type of thing you kind of want to look ahead. So. Rigging. And if we look at the rigging, this is kind of in the order of pain in the rear, so shall we say. Okay. Mounting for rough water, it's got to be secure. There's certain mounts for your units you don't want to use in the bow that are okay on the console. There's also some on the console you don't want to use on the bow. You just have to understand that. Cheap, and generally the cheaper mounts are probably not the ones you want if you want your units to come back in intact. Okay. Power is very, very critical here. You've got to make sure you have sufficient power for your units to last all day, so that at the end of the day, you can crank your big motor and get off the lake when you need to. Okay. I've had too many situations where I haven't made it back because my batteries died. And after I did that in one tournament, I came back and I put a 5th battery in, dedicated to just electronics. Okay. And then the wiring. We want to wire everything so that it is made for waterproof, rugged conditions. The way I rig boats, I typically rig it, you could probably take these in salt water without corrosion. Okay. But if you use the right connectors, the right wire, it sets you up for a lot of things. And I have noticed that both Erie and Ontario have some corrosion in the water. You've probably noticed it on some of your transducers. You see that little green showing up on it. That's the corrosion from, there's some weird chemicals out in these areas because you don't know what's been dumped in there the last X number of years. So, okay. So mounting, okay. First off, let's figure out where we want our sonar units. Then we need to figure out where the transducers get mounted and then where the other modules are mounted, okay. So the sonar unit mounting, okay. The one thing you want to do is when you place a unit, say on your bow or at the console, you need to make sure that whatever you're mounting it to can support your unit, okay? I've seen boats like, I saw a Triton down in North Carolina a couple weeks ago, and they were gonna put a unit on the bow, but I looked at the plate, the bow plate was like very thin plastic. And I can guarantee you up here, you take one wave, it's gonna be shredded, okay? You don't wanna have that happen, so if in doubt, if you don't think it's gonna support the load, always put some type of backing material in there. I prefer using the HPDE, which is HDPE, there we go. It's a high density polyethylene called Starboard. Okay, you can get this stuff on Amazon. I use that a lot. I haven't yet to pull a screw out of it, which I think is pretty impressive. I pulled screws out of aluminum. You know, I'll show you a picture of that in a little while. Yeah, but the Starboard's nice to work with. You know, if you got woodworking tools, chop saw, it's great. Jigsaw, fine. Hacksaw if you want. And it's relatively inexpensive. So I usually in the past I've been using 1/2 inch. I've switched up to 3/4 inch. Only because I can use a slightly longer screw and it doesn't poke through the material. Because I don't want anything poking on the backside. Okay, all right. So one thing you need to remember is the bow units are going to take more shock load on your boat. Okay, because it's up front, you're hitting waves like this. Okay, I don't know. Probably none of you have ever speared a wave. Okay, I'll give you the advantage. But you've never speared a wave and never torn anything up. I've only speared one in my new boat. Unfortunately, it was about 10 feet. And it was it was a backwash wave coming in out of Kingston. I was coming back in for weigh-in, and I just happened to pop the bow down slightly and over the bow. My buddy, who was sitting in the passenger side of this at the time, was not really happy with me. He was soaking wet. So, but the only thing that happened is I ripped out the piece out of my mount. So, and that's not bad for that much power coming into your boat. So, okay. So when you're mounting these units, again, you've got to bring power to it. You've got to get your transducer to it, and you most likely need to network it. Okay, I'm a big network guy. I'm a computer geek by, shall we say, profession. So I like to have everything connected. For years, I've had my engine connected to the network. I can tell you what's going on with my engine, you know, without having to buy an expensive monitor. I just have it on the screen. So there we go. So the one thing you want to do, make your mounting rugged. Okay. Try not to use screws. Use bolt through. Okay. Always use stainless. I'll show you one where in North Carolina they didn't use stainless. But I also use washers and nylon locking nuts. And the washers I typically use are the large fender washers. And there's a couple of varieties of those. I generally use the thick ones. Okay, and that's going to give you more load carrying capability and more ability to spread that load across that hole. Okay, if you just put the screw through the hole, put the nut on there, you're going to break it right at the hole. Don't want to do that. Okay. It'll fatigue over time. So, okay, so again, those are the backing plates I'm talking about. I have in the past, I put aluminum backing plates on a Phoenix boat. The Phoenix bow panel is a piece of plastic, shall we say, and everything makes it look rugged. Well, when I pulled that apart to redo his boat, 3 out of 4 of the holes are ripped out. That unit's about ready to fall out of his boat or be hanging by the cables. If you knew this guy, he runs, you know how Champlain gets kicked up. Okay, it gets kicked up pretty nasty. This guy will still run 70 miles an hour in that stuff. He's a good fisherman, but anyway, so his father won't ride with him anymore. Let's just put it that way. So, And the other thing you want to do is try to replace threaded bolts that are in aluminum plates with through bolts and lock washers and lock nuts and washers, okay? All right, and I'll show you an example why you want to do that. So, and this is why you use stainless. See right? See there? Yeah. Here's what I did. I was at an open house a couple weeks ago in North Carolina at a dealer. I had to be their Lowrance booth guy, okay, which was, normally I just go down and support their wireless and security systems. But so I was walking around the parking lot trying to get examples for you guys, and it didn't take very many boats to get a whole bunch of bad examples, and this is one of them. You know, I think it'll be a lot of fun for them when they try to pull it apart. Yeah. So okay. The other thing, if you have a ram mount or something like this, put all the screws in there. I mean, what's going to take you 2 to 3 minutes to do that? You know, oh, I only need 3 screws. No, you need 4. There's a lot of counterweight, even with those 3 there. So just add an extra screw. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm not a fan of ram mounts whatsoever. Okay. I forget the brand of this. This one's better, but it's still. But the problem is, you got your unit weight hanging out here as a cantilever, so it's giving you a lot of torque. You've got to consider that. This is not a unit way I'd want to mount a unit for Lake Erie, okay, at all. So, again, these boats are North Carolina boats, and they think it gets rough down there. They don't have a clue. So, this is a triple bow mount that I had installed on a Camus, and he was cruising up the St. Lawrence in a tournament, trying to make way in at 70 miles an hour, and neglected to notice there's ship wake was coming at him. So what happened is this screw, which was nice and secure in the aluminum, well, now the aluminum's on that screw. Okay. So what I did with it is I drilled the holes out that were stripped out, which are these exterior ones here, and I bolted them through. Now it just ruggedized his mount. Okay. So now that was done, I think 2 years ago, and no issues whatsoever. And the guy, he sold that boat to a guy in Alabama, and haven't heard anything from him. So, okay. Again, something simple, something you don't normally think about, but definitely worth doing.
Now you're not really trying to reinforce that mounting plate.
No.
Regular sized washers are okay in that case?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because actually, I've got this plate plus the other plate below it. So they're both 1/4-inch plates.
Okay.
So it's very strong. You know, I can't flex it. So. But then again, I'm weak, so, but I can take a hammer and try to.
I thought the aluminum would have held up.
Well, it did, except in the threads. And I've used.
Aluminum fatigues too.
Yes, it does, absolutely. But apparently he took a pretty hard hit. He said he came back, all 3 units were laying, so like this, they're flipped over backwards, laying on the front deck, being held on by the cables. So, of course, I also had to redo his light because I put a light on the bow as well. So.
People don't realize aluminum is a third
Yeah.
the strength of steel.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's not much to it.
Well, plus the milling costs are significant more for stainless than it is for aluminum.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah, it's a one-timer.
Right.
There's a lot of good hardware available now.
Oh, yeah. And these are anodized, it's treated aluminum, but I don't think you can break those. And these are what are called heavy-duty gimbal mounts. If you look at the gimbal mounts that come with the units you'll get, the thickness of that compared to the factory ones, that's about 4 times thicker and a lot stronger. If you take a factory mount and you go up and just flick it with your finger, it'll sit there and oscillate on you. You do not want that either while you're driving, so your unit's doing this. It makes it hard to see in rough water or even in calm water. Okay. But I've also seen where you take a factory mount, spear a wave, and now your mount that was like this is now like this, completely flat to the deck. We did that on Champlain in a tournament in my buddy's boat. Yeah, all I was doing was laughing. So, but anyway, so Bass Boat Tech is generally the products I use. This is also the Precision. This is the Precision's version of that Precision sonar. Okay. If you're good at metalworking, you got the facilities. They're not that hard to make, that stuff. Okay. The biggest issue with, say, the gimbal mounts is this ratchet piece right here. So, and if you know someone that does 3D printing for you, they can 3D print you a whole bunch of them really quick. So okay, console mounting. So, here's some basic rules for you. Okay. Try to put all your console units behind your windshield. Okay. Let the windshield take the brunt of the water. Okay. Not take the wind or the waves. Okay. Wind is fine, 70 miles an hour, you're running fine, no big deal. Spear wave at 20 miles an hour, your units are taking a major hit. Okay. So try to keep them always behind the windshield if you can. Okay. And if you can, put them in the console. Okay. If you got a single unit, you got a console big enough, mount it in the console. It's completely protected from the environment except for the face. Okay. Try not to use ram mounts, especially if they're exposed. We had a ram mount similar to that on one of Joe Fonzie's boats a couple of years ago because he wanted another unit on the console. And so we mounted it on the rail, which I told him I didn't like. And what happened over time, because of this corrosive nature of the water here, it actually corroded the NEMA interface so that if you had the NEMA interface plugged into the network, it would actually short the whole thing out. So that's why I don't like having things exposed to the weather. Okay. Again, back your pedestal style mounts with fender washers or some other bracing. Okay. Again, just overdo it. Okay. It's your boat. You want to rig it once. You want to do it, fix it, and do it right one time. Okay. So these are in console mounts. I think these were on tracker units, or tracker boats down south. Very similar to what a lot of you guys are running with a Lund or something like that. But again, what you do is cut into the bow plate and just mount it in that way. The nice thing about that, you know that unit's not going to fall out unless that plate's messed up. So, and this is a console mount I did on a boat near Lockport a couple years ago. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but anyway, this is a dual Garmin mounting. This panel here, it's a center console boat. It's actually a saltwater boat. And so we put the two units in there. That plate that went into the fiberglass plate, almost an inch thick. It was very difficult to get a router and cut it out. So, and that's, again, you're talking a couple $100,000 boat and you're cutting a hole into it. And so you're a little puckered up while you're doing it, okay? And if you're not, then something's wrong with you because you really have to be careful cutting these boats. We also cut in this unit down here, which is a VHF radio, okay? And I don't know how many of you guys have VHFs in your boat? Yeah, so you understand how important they are. So with the VHF, you got that plus the antenna and good power supply and everything. Now, do you also have yours hooked to the NEMA bus so you can get the, okay, do you run AIS on it? Cool. You're all set. Yeah, that's what I kept telling me. We need to get a VHF with AIS. We need to hook it into the network, and everything's hooked in on this boat. So, yeah, it's just wires and a little bit of planning. Yeah. So, okay. Now here's a ram mount. This was actually on a 17-foot aluminum tracker, and believe it or not, when I did a tournament out of Erie and Presque Isle, there was a couple of guys there, and they had planned on going out on the lake in one of these. And I'm looking at them like they need to have their head examined. This is not a rough water boat. But this ram mount here would be okay on small ponds and lakes and stuff. I would never put it on something big water. So, yeah, that's the inch and a quarter one. I had one of these ram mounts before I had the mounting products came on the market. Okay, and that's a 2 1/4 mount, which is the military size. Okay, I had a wrench to tighten that nut down, which is on the side there. Okay, and I would start with the unit vertical. I make a run on Champlain, 20 miles to get to the inland sea, and by the time I got over there, that unit was laying flat down, which makes it really hard to see your graph, especially if you're trying to follow a track line, because there are a couple places you want to cut corners on Champlain, but you don't want to cut corners without knowing where the trail is. Okay, so that's why I don't recommend that. The other thing, I don't know if you noticed, see this grommet cover? See how it's facing the weather? Don't do that. Run at 180. You know, there's a bunch of little things that once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But you know, these guys probably never thought about that because, hey, it's North Carolina lakes, they're not bad. Oh, a Kerr Lake can get bad if it's blowing a straight north wind. It's not as bad as Oneida because it doesn't have the length, but still, they consider that rough water. Yeah, they don't know. So anyway, but I used to use a wrench on that, and no matter how tight I wrenched it, it would never stay up because the internal balls of that and the mounting, the receiver mechanism is smooth. It needed to be textured. If it had been textured, it would have had a better chance of holding. Okay, so all right. So this is the console mount that I use. This is, I think, a Bass Pro one. It's one of their lower end ones, but it just perfectly fit. This is a 25-foot trolling boat. Oh, it's a Lund that I did a couple years ago. And that seemed to be pretty good. Again, the screws beneath this cover are all backed with those large washers. Okay, so because he typically, I think he said he goes out of Sodus Bay in Ontario, so a lot. So yeah, it was interesting. I had to use my tall ladder to get in this thing. So yeah, me and getting in boats not a fun thing. This is a boat I did over on the island here, and we used that similar type mount that you saw on that side, mount on the outside rail, but this is behind his windshield. And so we put the washers in here, all 4 screws in that. It's very stable. He hasn't mentioned anything. He's Erie, he's a car salesman. So, which actually made it kind of nice to work in this building there. Except when the guys were over there using the power tools. And then occasionally you hear a few cuss words going on when they're trying to take something apart. But anyway, but this is a Garmin setup. This setup, I put the active target module, the live scope module under the console here, out of the weather. I've got a console or a unit up on the bow as well. So and these are a couple that are not, they fit in space. A lot of your consoles will have small spaces here to mount units. The left one's the center console. The one on the right's just a standard, V-hull type stuff. I think that's a tracker. It's an off-brand center console. So, but it's a Johnny Morris one. I don't know what they call them. So, but anyway, so that's another idea, and that would be fairly safe and fairly rugged. Okay, you wouldn't need to. You still want to brace the bottom. Again, anywhere you connect to your boat, brace that because you're going to get stresses there. So, this is one that has both in console because we actually were able to finally get a mount for that, and then we have one on the rail. Okay, and he runs Oneida. Well, east-west on Oneida. Where do you want to be? Not on Oneida. Okay, so, but what happens is that he knew about the problem, so he was aware of it. But we didn't have much choice in this boat. But what we had to do is originally, where that unit is mounted was the tack was there, the speedometer. So we actually moved those from up here down to this area. Okay, we got what's called a gauge relocating package and just moved everything. So the least install was clean. And worst case, and here's what I have done on Champlain when I still had that style mount. I knew the weather was going to be really, really bad. I took my units off and put them in the console or in one of the lockers out of the way completely. And I ran on a small 5-inch unit to get back. Okay, so that's another advantage to having that type of mount. So, okay, and this is a type of mount that I use a lot. This is a dual console mount. And you can see here, that's those thick brackets, gimbal brackets I was talking about. If you tap the side of those, they don't move. And I've run those at, well, my boat only does I've had it at 65, but that was on the river in heavy, heavy current. And that's on below a lock on the St. Lawrence. Yeah, I know, believe me. My old boat would run 74, and this new boat's like, I'm running 60 in a tournament, which For me, sucks because I'm getting passed by all these clowns. So, but anyway, but I'm gonna get there safe. So, but anyway, but this is one of the dual mounts. This is a Bass Boat Tech. This is on a Camus, and it's a really solid, rugged mount. And I use something very similar to that on my boat. So bow mounts, that's always interesting because they're going to take a whole lot more abuse than these console mounts. Console, you're in the middle of the boat, you're not moving. Even if you raise the bow, you're only coming half distance, okay, from where the console is. So the bow is going to take a lot. What I try to do is I try to put the bow units below the top cap. I don't know all the true boating terms. I mean, it's like the top cap is the top piece of the boat, or the rails below the rails. If you can get below that so that the boat takes the brunt of the waves rather than the unit, good deal, okay? So, but again, the idea is to shield it from the waves, and if you can, let the trolling motor take the load, okay? So if you put your unit, and you got your trolling motor, say, in this circle here, and you want to put a unit on the bow, if you put it over here, it's going to take waves too. If you put it behind the trolling motor, it's still going to be very useful for you working it on the bow, but it'll let the trolling motor take the brunt. Okay. So, again, if you need to, beef up the mount and use the heavy duty gimbals. Okay. This is kind of a blank canvas. A lot of boats they'll look like that. This is the center console. This one's probably too blank. Where I would probably mount a unit on this would be right on this floorboard right here. So the unit, when it sticks up, it'll stay below that rail. And I wouldn't put a big unit on that boat. You know, probably a 7, maybe a 9, depends on how it fits in there. But I also ask them how you're using the boat. If they're just gonna run it on the flats in some backwater river, maybe it's a jet boat, then we don't have to worry too much. If they're gonna take it out in, say, Lake Norman, which is a big lake, and occasionally gets wind whipped, but nothing like here, then I'd probably keep it below that rail line. But for up here, it would definitely be below. And I convinced them to go with multiple units, multiple smaller units in one big unit. Okay. So this is another way to do a bow mount, but it's in the panel mount. Very similar to the console. Okay. That's on a Ranger boat. That 622 that's in the floor probably has a unit like that on it. Okay. So, now this is one a lot of you guys may have. I don't know how many have the Lunds, but this is their older track mount. And what we did, we took a 7-inch unit and actually mounted it to this piece right here. So it actually fit into his track, and we didn't have to get an external mount. We used the strength that was already to that rail system. It was already secure to the boat. And that unit, when we got finished, it was below the rail, okay? So it's well protected, it's still useful, but it was just one of those things like, oh, how can we mount this thing? And he had some spare track mounts, receivers, so that's what we did. The only thing you have to worry about with that is the screws have to be put in upside down, otherwise it won't lock in the rail. Okay, so, but again, you know, if you got that rail system, you might have the extras. Makes it easy. So. And this is a bow system where I've got the older style gimbal mounts, which here, because the original gimbal mounts were the same size as the old ones, or as the original factory ones, and actually fit over them, and then you screwed them together. It created pretty good security, but not as good as the new ones. Okay, but this is on that same Phoenix I was telling you about, where the guy runs 70 miles an hour in rough conditions. Okay. So for his boat, this is a little 7-inch unit in the front console there, or front bow panel. That was backed with an aluminum plate, okay? And then this was all put in there, and this was all screwed to the deck. And that works, okay? The guy has been running with this configuration for roughly 4 years now in Champlain. And if he hasn't torn it up yet, it's probably not going to, which is good. But I've also since replaced his trolling motor as well with another unit, with a Ghost. So, okay. What the heck? There you go. Okay. Here's a couple. If you guys have recessed trolling motor pedals, I know some of the V-hulls will have that. Basically gives you more flare space. I know a lot of guys will run like a Tarova, something, they'll have that cable connected to your foot pedal. You may not even use it because you got a great remote control. Okay, but if you don't and you have one that's embedded in your floor plan or floor pan on the front, then you can use the over the pedal mounts. Okay, both of these would be okay. This is a little high, but I would use, again, no heavy duty gimbal mounts right here. I would end up putting the heavy duty ones on that. In fact, this is a Triton boat that I mentioned earlier where we added this second 12 on the bow. This is a precision sonar mount system, and he actually was going to go home. He had the brackets at the house, so he was going to get home and swap them out. Now the neat thing is they make two different heights on that. And here's what you have to be worried about. If you mount something like that on the bow of your boat, when you're sitting in your seat, can you see over them? Okay? When I got my boat, I've got a 522D, the Ranger one, and it was supposed to come with air ride seats. Well, they didn't put them in, so now my seats are, instead of being up here, they're down here, about 6 inches too low. So when I put my bow units on, I could not see while I'm running over the bow. I had a major blind spot on the port side. Okay, so what I did to resolve that, I got the shorty mounts, so it knocks off about half that height. Okay, nice little option. And then of course I had the air rides because that helps save your back. Trust me, it's a major, major improvement. So, and that's something I didn't put in here, but you know, if you got an option to get air rides in your boat, it will save your back over time. I was fishing tournaments with the old seats. About midday, my back was killing me. With the air rides, I can go all day and I'm good all the way through the way in. So, of course, I may hurt in the hotel, but I'm at least good through the tournament day. So, yeah. So this is a triple mount. Most likely, if you're not a bass guy and not really super into live sonar, or you're not a crappie fisherman, okay, which I don't think it's big up here. It is down south, trust me. It's major. Oh yeah. You think bass boats are well equipped. I've seen crappie boats with like 8 units on it and 4 live systems, you name it. But I've also seen pontoon boats down on Okeechobee where they must have 40 rod holders on it. And I come off the lake into a canal, turn the corner, and there's a crappie boat sitting there with 40 rods out. I'm thinking, what happens if you get 40 bites at a time? Imagine the cluster you're going to have going. It's like, you know. So, or you get a bass, and then you get a bass in there chasing a crappie around. That should be hilarious. So anyway, but that's a triple mount. And we mixed the hummingbird, one hummingbird with a 360 with the Lowrance stuff. So, okay. So now these are questionable mounts. I personally would not recommend any of these for your bow. Okay. This one, obviously a little tall, right? You can see how much higher it is than your top pallet. It's way above your trolling motor. Okay. There's got to be a better option. I know that as I get older, my eyes are turning to mush, but still, I want to keep my units. You know, if it's bad enough, I'll just wear glasses on the boat. So, and this one definitely, you got a ram mount, and then the high mount there, and then this one, obviously, this one's the same. So these are the ones I would not rig for up here. Okay, so like I say, the price is what you want to pay for a mount.